Christopher Morris was just 11 years old, full of life, curiosity, and dreams like any other child his age. He lived on a military base where safety and order were supposed to be a given. But one day, everything changed, and his lifeless body was found inside of those walls that were supposed to protect him. This isn't a story you've heard before. It's a haunting mystery wrapped in silence and secrecy, filled with questions no one has dared to fully answer. Let's dive right into it. Christopher Aaron Morris was born on March 3, 1989. He lived with his father, Staff Sergeant Carl Morris, on Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, Texas. Christopher's mother was Shirley Shatley, and his parents were actually divorced, so his father remarried a woman named Kelly. Friends and family described Christopher as a happy and active child, a boy who loved the simple joys of childhood, such as playing football, building Lego, and watching Power Rangers on TV. At school, Christopher was getting good grades and was very liked. Everyone agreed that he was definitely one of those kids who could make friends very easily. And to those who knew him, Christopher was just like any other 11-year-old boy, full of energy, curiosity, and dreams. But behind all of these seemingly normal things, there were whispers and hints of troubles that no one fully understood. But this all would change very soon, and Christopher's name would become known for one very chilling reason. On one gloomy day during the boys' fall break in 2000, Christopher was home alone. We don't really know why he was left alone that day, but his father was at work, so presumably there was nobody available to spend the day with the boy and keep an eye on him. But Christopher was 11 years old, so he definitely was at the age where he wouldn't be completely hopeless or he would get himself into a lot of trouble. He knew how things worked at home, and so most likely he wasn't afraid of being left home alone. He was actually probably looking forward to having the day to himself, where he could just do whatever he wanted. When his dad Carl finally returned home at around 2 p.m. that day, something immediately seemed off to him. The house seemed very quiet, which was strange considering Christopher would usually fill the space with all sorts of noises. Carl called out to his son, but nobody replied. When Carl stepped into the kitchen, he noticed that the dishwasher rags had been removed. And at first he didn't really understand why anyone would do that, and so he just brushed it off. He called out for Christopher again, but the boy did not answer him for the second time. So Carl went into his room to see maybe if the boy was there. But when he opened the door, Carl stopped in his tracks. Spread out on Christopher's bed were the dishwasher racks. And his bed was stripped of the sheets. Now, this small detail will later be one of the many unsettling clues about this case, but I will get into that in just a few moments. By this point, Carl was curious but also concerned. He walked back into the kitchen and decided to open the dishwasher to see what was really going on. But when he did, he made a terrible discovery. Lying in there was his son's naked, lifeless body. Carl immediately called the emergency services, who managed to quickly arrive at the scene, but unfortunately there was nothing anyone could do for Christopher. Upon inspection, it was found that the dishwasher had completed a full cycle. This meant that Christopher's body had gone through the dishwasher's washing and drying process, so there was just no way that the boy could have ever survived this. And so once the door was closed on Christopher, there was just no way out. And his clothes? They were found beside the machine, neatly folded. Now, as you can imagine, the scene was extremely chilling, but also very baffling. None of it was making any sense. Everyone started asking questions like how and why would Christopher get inside the dishwasher? Was it on his own initiative? And if so, why did he decide to take his clothes off? Or who else was in the house with him? And if someone else put him into the machine, what was really the cause of Christopher's death? Now, this must be really one of the worst ways to pass that I have ever come across, and I can't even imagine who would do this to a child. What was their motive? And had that anything to do with his father Carl, perhaps? But all of these questions would be set aside because the investigation itself almost immediately began shrouded in confusion and secrecy by the military police. The local law enforcement and other agencies also got involved in this case, but they were all given extremely conflicting information or provided virtually no details to the public. And you really have to start asking yourself the questions of why, like what were they hiding? The reason why a lot of people believe that there was something else going on was the fact that the autopsy report, which was a key piece of the puzzle, was never publicly released. Now, reports indicate that investigators faced huge delays and that there were many inconsistencies in the forensic evidence, as it could have even been tampered with. And again, this all sounds just too wishy-washy to me and more like an excuses rather than real and useful answers. According to some other accounts, the pathologists determined Christopher died from injuries sustained inside of the dishwasher. But how exactly and why he died still remains unclear. Like I've already said, the dishwasher alone would 100% be able to end your life. There is just no question about that. But if that was the case and the boy had no prior injuries, then why just not say that? In a case like this where a minor is involved in a highly gated environment, why would you cast any doubts or shadows over the cause of his death if he really did not have any other injuries that had been caused before the dishwasher incident? This all really makes me feel like there's a lot more to the story. And the reason behind this is quite simple, but also very haunting and frustrating, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. All of the circumstances about what could have happened added very eerie undertones to the story, but because no official explanation was ever provided, and factual details about this case have been limited, rumors and stories began to spread all over the internet. Some say Christopher was dared by friends to climb inside of the dishwasher, so this would make it a horrifying game gone terribly wrong. Others believe that someone actually locked him inside it intentionally, and he died either from suffocation or injuries sustained during the dishwasher cycle. I think this is the more plausible of the two, because of one very simple fact. Dishwashers cannot be operated from within the machine itself, so someone else had to push the button to start the cycle, there's just no doubt about that. But my question is, why was this never taken into consideration? You don't need to have a master's degree to figure this one out, so what happened? And based on this, I also think you might agree that something entirely else was at play there. Let's not forget that this incident happened on a military base. And I think that is exactly where the problem lies. This kind of environment is a place where information is often guarded very closely. Also, it is not unheard of that the military protects their own. So what many, including me, believe is that the military officials suppressed evidence to protect their reputation. We know for a fact that evidence has been hidden before, and so it really sounds like this is exactly what happened to Christopher's case as well. In terms of evidence, one online source mentions that an unknown handprint was found inside of the dishwasher itself. But of course, this crucial detail was never followed up on publicly. So whether they ever looked into that, or if this was even true, we just simply don't know. Additionally, the bedsheets that were missing from Christopher's bed have never been found, which spark even more theories that evidence might have been destroyed or concealed. To confuse the public even more, it had been also confirmed that no signs of sexual assault or torture were ever found. And I'm mentioning this because it directly contradicts all of the early speculations about the boy being assaulted. But again, since this case seems to be heavily tampered with, who knows what is actually true. Now, there's one more thing that we need to consider, and that is the extremely troubling history of child abuse cases on military bases. There was a detailed 2005 blog post titled "Child Abuse Death on Military Bases," and this blog highlighted the fact that military families sometimes face unique challenges, including strict discipline, isolation, and a culture of silence. This basically means that the life in these military bases tends to be very different from the life we know and are used to. And these kids especially grow up in a very isolated environment where if abuse does happen, they have no one to turn to for help. I've already highlighted the military system has been criticized for protecting its own. And in line with this, it is also known for failing to investigate child abuse allegations. It just all sounds like everyone is just too busy doing something else, and that they have no intentions of ever following up on cases where domestic abuse is present. Almost like sort your own house kind of a thing, which is of course completely rubbish, and it's exactly where even more problems fester. I would also compare it to the horrible saying of "real men don't cry," which is of course what caused many men to go on without ever getting the help they needed. So yeah, it all very much sounds like the military bases have the exact same mindset to that. And I would even go further to say that perhaps some of these people are being even punished for not being able to handle their own situation, hence they never speak up and go on to cover up things on their own. What is safe to say is that Christopher's death fits a disturbing pattern where child deaths on bases have often gone unresolved or been subject to minimal scrutiny. And this is exactly where a larger intervention should come in, but of course, that never happened. There's one more thing worth looking into, and that is the fact that back in 2021, Christopher's sister Ashley came forward on a podcast to apparently clarify some details. She said that there was no sexual assault or torture involved, and out of nowhere she also mentioned two possible suspects that were never publicly named. This was a dishwasher repairman and a teenager who supposedly knew even more than they should have. She went on to suggest that Christopher may have accidentally gotten locked inside of the dishwasher, either alone or with friends who did not know what would happen next. But either way, the dishwasher could not have been turned on by itself from the outside, so someone had to press it, and she never acknowledged that. Ashley's personal revelations have kept the story alive, and more questions were coming, but official answers still remain elusive. And the story is pretty much the only official thing we have access to, because all of the other details about his case have been mysteriously erased. Let's also not forget the fact that Ashley is from the same family, and so she grew up in the same environment. Who knows, maybe she was instructed to shift the blame onto these two new suspects so that it would cast a shadow away from the military and her own family. And that could very well be because Christopher's father, Carl, was at first accused of unaliving his son. But of course, that soon was dropped, and it seemed like no proper investigation was ever done either. And so even after all these years, Christopher Morris's death still remains a cold case, and it looks like we will never have the answers about what really happened to him. Military authorities have remained largely silent, and official records remain sealed or missing. But Christopher's story is more than a cold case. It's a haunting reminder of how children in vulnerable environments can become victims of circumstances and systems that fail them. It raises important questions about transparency in investigations on military property and the accountability of institutions responsible for protecting children. But equally, it does not look like many are talking about this case anymore, so there's just no pressure on these organizations to start becoming accountable. Let's also not forget that Christopher's story should remind us that behind every headline or cold case file is a real person, and that all of those unanswered questions still demand justice and resolution. If anything, this story challenges us to keep asking hard questions about how do we protect our most vulnerable, especially in places where secrecy often prevails. These institutions need a radical overhaul, but that will not happen overnight. And it will also not happen unless there are more voices demanding justice and information. So if you can, share this story around and let's get the conversation going. It is not fair that something so horrific was allowed to happen, and that nobody was ever charged. There's just no doubt that the military failed this boy massively, and that they helped cover up his murder and the whole reason behind it. I'm genuinely sick of all these institutions where they think that they're above us and the common law, so I would genuinely love to see a change myself. The saying of "this is how it's always been done" should not be allowed to continue to happen. And progress has to be made where it's needed, otherwise more cases like this will be allowed to happen. But please let me know your thoughts. Do you also think that Christopher's death was nothing but a cover-up? Until next time.